All right. So moving on into the actual content we have today, first and foremost, I want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Mika. You'll also see my full name, Michaela, from time to time, but they're both me. I am the director of the retrofitMAINE initiative, which is part of passivhausMAINE. If you're familiar with a bit of building science, you'll know Passive House is a rather high-level building standard, and we are a nonprofit covering a lot of Maine. We're based out in Freeport, but we do a lot of workforce trainings across the state. We actually also go into New Hampshire a bit, which is quite nice because I am based out of New Hampshire. But we have a whole realm of things, and I obviously work specifically with our retrofit side of things, so those existing buildings. And we will do a little bit more of a definition of retrofit in just a moment, so don't worry about that. I also want to apologize. I think that my microphone should be doing okay, but there is, ironically, construction going on right outside my home. It is perfect timing, isn't it? But it is road construction, not building, so it's much less interesting. But hopefully I don't get all of that being picked up by my microphone. Now, for the content today that I have prepared, I'm going to first go into a little bit of how we can consider our homes as systems. So again, that definition of like what we're talking about when we're talking about retrofits, introducing the concept of a building envelope, which some of y'all may be familiar with, as well as digging into a little bit more about what energy efficiency is, and then this concept of the retrofit ladder, the rungs that we can take on our way to having a more efficient building. And then we can dig in a little bit more into the what can we do section. And so we've got some low to higher cost options. Some of these are going to be very simple, very basic. I'm sure you've heard about them since you were yay haul, right? And yet I still find them important enough to bring up even now. And then we can also go into some of those that are going to be more complicated. I also have a handful of resources that may be able to help depending on your situation. And then also I'm happy to highlight our free energy coaching service that we have with retrofitMAINE, if it might be of interest to anyone as essentially another resource that could be beneficial. And then we'll be able to go into our Q&A section as well. And hopefully answer any of those additional questions. I will note for that Q&A and just in general here, I'm trying to keep things fairly basic for this presentation. I'll note I've been in this role for a couple of years now. I definitely know a thing or two about building science, especially with retrofits. I am not an expert on any like very specific thing. In the event that you have a question that is more in depth on something, I will answer to the best of my ability. If I don't have a full answer, I will just tell you that. And I am happy, so happy to follow up with you later on. And we can, email, get on the phone. I'm happy to connect you with people who might know more about that subject, or just provide you with some additional resources after I look into it a little bit further. So with that, the one other note I have is that this is actually the first of a series. So we are going to be doing more webinars focused on building retrofits, on home retrofits later this year. Our next one is going to be in April. So they're going to be quarterly. This is the first of 4 this year. And these next 3 of the year are going to be focused more on like that ask the expert sort of style. And so if there are any specific specialties or topics that come to mind, be thinking of that as we're going through this content, as we get into that Q&A. I will have a poll at the end that asks if you do have any specific asks that you're looking for people that I should be bringing in to be talking about more things. So with that, I actually first have one poll to get a little bit more of an idea of where we're currently at with our building science knowledge. So I just want to get a bit of an idea, mostly so I can know what kind of jargon I should be using or shouldn't be using as we talk in. I don't want to, use words that don't make any sense or beat horses that we already know all about. And then also I want to compare what you're saying now with for your knowledge of building science with what you'll say after, and get an idea of if we might have been able to help a little bit or if we might need to cover additional knowledge in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll right now. It should pop up on your screen, and it's just asking how you're rating your current knowledge of building science and energy efficiency. So we've got a 1 to 5 scale here to get an idea. And this is all completely anonymous, by the way, so I don't know how people are answering. Awesome. Okay, so we've got a pretty good range here. Excellent. Thank y'all so much for answering nice and quickly too. I appreciate it. All right, so we've got ranging down into the 2, and we've got someone who's over here in the highest as well, which is very exciting. So I'll try and keep it pretty broad here, and feel free, again, if any questions pop up that maybe more simple to answer, please throw them in the chat. And if anyone feels like they know how to answer that before I get to it, feel free to do so. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get started, and we're going to dig in first and foremost to what even is a retrofit, just to make sure that we're all having the same definition as we move forward, even though some of us may have this down pat. So essentially, all it really comes down to is that a retrofit is renovating an existing building to upgrade it in some way. That could be its energy efficiency, its safety, to meet new standards like our new building and energy code. It could be just to update the types of materials that it's made out of or something like that. The key aspect here is that it's maintaining the core of the building and it's not doing a rebuild. These definitions are important because building code requirements come into play depending on what it actually is. These are really just classified based on the percentage of the structure that's being changed. So it's about normally around 50% of that structure being changed, then that's going to start being classified as a rebuild. There's more that goes into it, but I think that that's all we really need to know for the time being. That said, that 0 to 50% is quite a large range. So retrofits can be very small or quite large. And when I say small, I personally will even consider doing like electrical changes, like even just your light bulbs can be a form of retrofit. It is an upgrade focused on energy efficiency. Typically, it's not what a lot of people in the sector are going to be talking about when we're talking about retrofits, but I think that it is still a very nice, important, and accessible form of that. So there is a wide range there. And now I want us to then think, when we're thinking about what that range could look like, I think it's important for us to first take a moment to look at our home a little bit differently than we may already. And so this is where I'm going to be introducing that concept of the building envelope that I mentioned before. So here we have I suppose it's supposed to be a typical home. Google only gives me so many options when I was looking for a nice, simple graphic. So excuse the strangeness of the home. But we have let's say, typical home. And what you're going to notice first and foremost is this lovely little red line that goes all around the interior of the home. And this is going to be that building envelope. If you noticed our logo for our organization, passivhausMAINE and retrofitMAINE, the lobster in a little house, the house is surrounded by a red line to designate that envelope. That envelope delineates, the conditioned space within the envelope versus the unconditioned space outside, right? And so that's going to be essentially an air seal. You've got your insulation, right? Keeping that space nice and comfortable, heated, cooled inside versus, not letting that outdoor air in. You'll see also in this fun little graphic that we have a little attic area up here that's not included in that building envelope. And that is something that I will be touching on a few more times throughout these slides, because that is a recurring theme in a lot of the building science world, of the importance of making sure our attic spaces are delineated correctly, I'll say. So if we peel back this a little bit further, just to get a little bit more in depth, I apologize for the busyness of this graphic, but I think it does a good idea of helping us to better understand some of what is in our building, in our home. If we look first at our walls, for instance, this doesn't have all of the aspects that I would like it to have in a graphic, but again, we're limited. So we have our siding here. Typically, and you'll have seen this if you've ever had like a neighbor getting their home re-sided that you happen to drive past, or if you've been seeing like a new build going on, you probably saw a building pre-siding put on that had all of this kind of fun paper, maybe with some tape in between the papers that were all around the edge. And then they just put the siding typically right on top of that. Those papers, those forms of air barriers are typically what we're looking at. Also see a lot of vapor barriers in other situations as well. Those are going to typically be your next layer under that siding. They are going to be an integral part of that building envelope. Having that air sealing, it's much special paper that I'm going. If you touch it, you'd be able to notice immediately. This form of this graphic also shows them, instead of that, they've got these 2 layers of foam that have these staggered seams to stop that airflow and to help doing some additional insulation. Then, of course, behind this, you've got typical wood framing, and then in between those joists, you've got your insulation, which they have been blown in. Now, if you're in a home like mine, you probably don't actually have that insulation. Older homes, a lot of us have in Maine, are not actually very well insulated, especially in our walls. And so that's something that I hear a lot, especially with my energy coaching clients, is a lot of folks are concerned and interested in doing more with their walls. They want to do that and improve that insulation. But I will note that that is typically not going to be where you get the best bang for your buck. Walls are a lot more complicated to put in insulation-wise for how much that really benefits you. Now, if they're super not air sealed and everything like that, it's possible that it may be worth it, but it very much depends on your specific budget. If we're talking about doing an improvement for the building envelope that is going to have a very good return on investment, a good ROI, typically what you're always going to hear from those in the field is attics. Attics are, as you can see here, as you saw in this line, something that can be a little bit tricky for delineating in the building envelope, and they're extremely important. The majority of our heat loss in the heating season is through the attic. And if they're improperly insulated and sealed off, we're also going to then have that heat trapping and pushing back in the summertime. So we really want to invest first and foremost in the attic, and the basement is going to be a close second. There's a lot of nuance into all of this, and it of course depends on each specific situation, but typically that is going to be what we see in most situations. And especially in the basement, I will highlight the rim joists, which are looking at these kind of horizontal. If you're inside the basement and you look at the edge of your house, you typically can see some horizontal framing, some horizontal wood boards essentially that run all around. Your structure is basically sitting on them, it kind of looks like. That is typically either or very under insulated area. And that is also going to be a lot of what you feel then if you're walking around and your floors feel really cold right around the edge of your home. They do in mine. That is typically going to be a very good indicator that your rim joists could use some additional insulation. I will also note that it is one of the easiest DIY areas, your basement in general, but especially that area. However, I will also note, make sure if you are ever interested in doing that, that you are doing your research, because you can have moisture issues if you insulate without having a broader knowledge of some of the important aspects of building science there. I won't get into it all right now, but that's just my one little asterisk for that. Now, one of the other things that you will hear as we talk about building envelope, if you're moving forward with anyone talking about that weatherization or insulation side of things, you're going to probably hear things about a tight versus a loose building envelope. And so a tight building envelope, as we see here, is going to basically be just a very airtight, well-insulated space that's going to allow for only a very few air leaks. And that's going to make it easier to control the indoor environment. So it's going to make that require a lot less work, for instance, for your heating system in order to function properly. It's going to be a lot more efficient, and it's going to end up making it more affordable for you to work. So you will often hear time and time again that working on that building envelope is going to be the best investment that you can make for your home if that's your goal. Versus, of course, a loose building envelope, if you've heard the old adage of, oh, a home should be breathing, that sort of thing. That is essentially what is happening with a looser building envelope. When a nice breeze hits your home and you feel it inside, that is what is happening. And it just makes it a lot more difficult for that home system to really be functioning in an efficient way without all of that outside influence. Because really what it comes down to is that your home is truly its own system, and then it has all of these other systems working within it, and it is trying to manage so much at one time. So I have here, consider all of these things that your home systems are dealing with on a daily basis. I threw out a bunch in this. I'm sure that you will come up with plenty more, but just for starters, right, we've got our lights. So many different situations, so many that are being kept on all the time. If you're home like me or any of my neighbors, we've got water, we've got water heating, can be a little bit complicated and fun to deal with. You've got humidity, both from that hot water and also just from you, right? We're human beings. We are 80% water or something like that. We expel hot water, essentially, humidity as we speak. So all of that is fun to deal with air quality wise. Heating, just a whole big challenge, obviously, to try and find an efficient system that's actually going to function well and not be breaking the bank. Maybe AC, if you happen to have it, be one of the lucky few with a central AC, but even still, if you've got one of those window units or ground units, typically very inefficient systems. Cooking, obviously, as you're cooking, you've got particles going all out in the air, again, affecting the air quality. You're adding additional heat into the air, depending on what exactly it is you're doing, what kind of cooktop you have. Do you have it properly ventilated, or is it like mine where it's just going through a flimsy little filter and shooting right back at you? So many aspects in that. Windows, another one that's sort of like walls. A lot of folks really want to upgrade them and are disappointed in the fact that you're not going to get a huge improvement with them. Glass can only do so much. Attic spaces, in contrast, again, one of those that are going to be quite an investment, I won't lie, but quite a good investment typically if it's possible, if it's feasible. And of course, then we have those basements, which are very similar. And then just so much more that I will not bother wasting our time going through, but I'm sure pop up in your head that may be even unique to you and your home. And so there's a lot for your home to manage. And so that's where we really try to make things as efficient as possible. And you'll hear me and other folks in the sector talk about efficiency, meaning different sorts of things. Typically, if I'm talking about efficiency, we're going to be really talking about minimizing energy use while maintaining comfort. And that can take so many different forms. But you'll also hear folks talking about a system itself, a mechanical, so like your heating system, your oil boiler, your gas burner, your electric heat pump, having those be efficient systems. For instance, a heat pump is the most efficient system, and we do have them working very well here in Maine now. We have cold climate heat pumps that function efficiently down to very, very low temperatures. That said, then any sort of heating system or cooling system or anything like that could also be installed in an inefficient way. If you have a not great installer who doesn't really know their stuff, they might put things in places that don't quite make sense for the airflow of your home. So there's a lot of different elements for efficiency, but in general, we're really just talking about minimizing that energy usage while making sure that you're comfortable inside your home. And so the last concept I really want to get into in this kind of building science background piece is this concept of a retrofit ladder, which I took from a colleague, Randy Rand, that he likes to use. And so we've got all of these rungs along the way to the ladder, to the top of the ladder of this big retrofit project. Not things that you have to do all at once, obviously, things that you will slowly piece by, slowly make your way stepping up the ladder. You're starting with, your electricals, your bulk water, getting that air sealing done, adding that insulation. Then you're looking at maybe some windows, doors, then your ventilation. That's only if you get a very, very tight building envelope that you might want to be looking at adding or improving some of those ventilation. And then your mechanicals, which typically when we're saying that, we're referring to like your HVAC system and that sort of thing. Your heat pump water heater or other electric water heater, oil, all of that sort of thing. And the whole point that I really like to use this to show is that I want to make sure that we're considering what's shiny versus what's invisible. Like I said before, a lot of people come in and are immediately talking to me about their windows feeling very leaky or their doors. Maybe if you've got a single pane, that might be a higher priority than I would have normally said. But otherwise, consider what's invisible first. Consider that air sealing that you're not thinking about. If you have interest in going more electric and are interested in solar down the line, maybe really we want to, talk more about our electrical systems first and make sure that we're really prepared and going through this in a way that makes sense. That said, what makes sense is not always going to be this beautiful, straight line up the ladder. This is for, what we would consider a deep energy retrofit. And yes, sorry. So yeah, I think spell checker would do that. So this is going to be for yes, there we go. And so thank you for the responses in the chat. Apologies for my distraction. But so this is going to be maybe not always the most direct line up the ladder in every situation. This is much more akin for a deep energy retrofit where we're trying to get something that is extremely airtight, extremely decarbonized, right? So all electric, that sort of thing. This is going to make sense for that, especially if we have the budget to do all of that, which is not going to be every situation. A lot of the time I come in as an energy coach and I'm talking to a client and trying to work with whatever they have as their priorities, what they've got going on. And then we find out that they've got an oil boiler system that is 30, 40 years old even, and has been well maintained in order to get to that point. But now we're looking at the age of that and we're worried about it failing next heating season, next winter. And we're saying that actually needs to be a higher priority. What do we need to do in order to make that happen? Preferably in the most efficient way possible, but we'll have to see what the budget allows for, right? So these are all so nuanced. And then I also want to point out that very importantly, some things are even more accessible before we start going down along these lines, right? And so that's where I'm going to start throwing out a bunch of ideas because, what does this actually look like? And does it have to cost a lot? There are so many things that you can do. Really making your home more energy efficient. It's a very unique process to each home. It depends on, how you live, where you live, what you can afford, and especially your personal priorities, what you're looking for to get out of your home as a system. But importantly, low cost and especially DIY opportunities definitely do exist. So I'm going to throw out a bunch of ideas. And again, some of these are going to be simpler. I'm going to try and go through quicker as I'm looking at the time, especially. I want to try and not spend too long on this. But again, throw things out in the chat, or if you want to if you have additional ideas that you want to pop into the chat that might pop into your head, feel free to do so. And then we can also talk more in the Q&A section at the end. So first and foremost, some efficiency measures are going to be user focused. These are the ones you'll have heard time and time again. Turn off the lights when you aren't using them, right? If that's a difficulty for you for whatever reason, accessibility wise, having them on timers, if you have maybe a smart home, some cheaper costs, right? Having those smart bulbs or a smart plug for your lamp, and you can tell the Amazon or Google or whatever it is to turn off for you, maybe make it a little bit easier. Same concept of unplugging appliances and things when you aren't using them, when they aren't being needed, so that you don't have that slight tiny bit of electrical vampire energy, as they say. Another one that is told time and time again is if you don't have an efficient dishwasher, making sure that you're hand washing your dishes as efficiently as possible. It's going to save both on water and on your hot water side of things. So if you're not familiar, the 2-tub method is considered the most efficient way to hand wash your dishes. It's going to be 1 tub of that very hot soapy water, 1 that's that clean rinse tub, scrub in the soapy, rinse it out, hand it over to the dryer or to air dry. And speaking of dryers, if you are used to using a dryer, you can try air drying your clothes. It's also much better to the actual linens and your clothing, to the fabric itself, to reduce that heat. And related to that, using less hot water in the washing cycle as well. But it can be very beneficial, and it does actually add up in terms of cost reduction for that. Most clothes dryers are not going to be super efficient, and so will cost you a little bit more. And then another one that I find fun to remind folks about is to vacuum out the back of your refrigerator, keep those coils clean and everything. That goes for all those sorts of appliances, especially any of those ones like if you have an air purifier, humidifier this time of year, anything that has an air intake, it's going to be beneficial to try and remember to vacuum that out more often than not. And just to drive the point home and be a little bit vulnerable, I did take a picture of when I did mine recently. So this is the back of my refrigerator. I did go ahead and I had only thought to take the photo after I'd already removed a lot of the lint that was out on the edge here, but you can see a little bit of the preview. If you haven't had to do this before, it's very simple to just unscrew these edges. This is just kind of like a thick cardboard type paper. And then you can pull that right off and see the lovely insides. I don't know entirely how long it had been since this had been previously cleaned, but clearly it needed it. I wish I had flash on this, but you can get an idea already of just how bad it can be. So obviously you don't want all of this lint and dust buildup in the system. This is a twofold situation of one, it's going to help that appliance, having this cleared out, help that appliance work more efficiently. It's going to have better air intake and everything like that, can be able to keep cooler while it's functioning. It's also, if you continue to keep those this area, the air intake area clean, you're going to be able to extend the longevity of that appliance, which is of course typically what we want. We don't want to have to be buying new ones constantly. So this is not like a high traffic, home or anything like that. So just, keep in mind, I won't be showing that very often. And then there are some other things that we can do for our home energy efficiency that do require some smaller investments. So ensuring that our light bulbs are switched over. I know we've heard that time and time again. It can save tens of dollars depending on, your home size and your light usage over the course of a year. I do typically see LEDs nowadays, not so many CFL, but they're also more efficient than halogen bulbs. I do still see halogens, I think more especially like if you've got like those long kitchen lights, those are still some of those I see. But most often, it is harder to find those. So hopefully most folks are switched over there. Another one that I would recommend is, of course, switching to a low flow shower head. That's another double duty one with both your water and your hot water, of course. They tend to be pretty low cost, like 15 to 30 for a plain sort of fixture. And you can cut water with a low flow by about 1.5 gallons per minute, which obviously can add up quite a bit. And they still function pretty dang well if you get a good quality one. Another is Windows, which I realize not expected, and I'm not talking like an actual new window update, but I do want to kind of take this as a moment to highlight a reusable window insert that I highly recommend and am involved with as an organization. Window dressers, if anyone hopefully has heard of them before. If you're ever interested, you can go to windowdressers.org. These are custom-made reusable window inserts that are fit to your specific window. They are made with custom pine frames, as you can see the gentleman in this picture creating. It's got some double sealing plastic. There's foam edging that'll kind of create like what we call a friction fit into your window frame at home. This is an all volunteer done project. It's got an annual community builds all across Maine and New Hampshire, Vermont. I think they've might have even extended down into Massachusetts by now. I'm not entirely sure. If you're in the Freeport, Lewiston, Cumberland area, I might even be your measurer. I'm a measuring coordinator for our build that is at our location for passivhausMAINE in downtown Freeport. We come to your home and do measuring of all of your windows to make sure that the resulting frame that is built at that community build, it will fit. And then the other thing that I will highlight for this is that it is encouraged for you to spend time volunteering and to help get your window inserts. But in general, it is a sliding cost scale. So if you can pay the full cost of your window inserts, depending on window size, it might be around like 50, 60 bucks. You can also get them painted, either just plain white or whatever color you might have if you have a niche one. But if you are struggling, we don't need to go through finances or anything like that, but we can get them as low as free. So very much is still in that smaller level of potential cost, and a really great organization. And so then we can have also some higher, more moderate costs, perhaps. One of the big ones that I just really wanted to highlight is to plan to invest in some more efficient appliances. You know, you've got your dishwasher, clothes washer, dryer, space heaters, air purifiers, all of them go in to this, and a lot of them are, you know, included in things like Energy Star or the Energy Guide. You may see, right, those big yellow pieces of paper if you go into the Lowe's or the Home Depot, right? You can also take that a step further and consider doing a cost comparison to estimate whether you should make the switch before your current item is needing to be replaced, especially if you can figure out the current model and pull up that Energy Guide. You can get a bit of an idea of that cost. There's my mouse. Of that operating cost, how it is a range of similar sorts of models, and then see some of the other ones to compare that with. You can also use this to get a bit more of an idea of how much you're really spending on it in your total bill by comparing the estimated electricity usage of kilowatt hour based on then your rate that you're paying in your area. We can get a little bit more niche into this. You can very specifically find out how much that appliance is drawing. You can use specific add-ons to your plugs and everything like that. But for just a basic, you should be able to figure out some good information from that if that's something that's of interest to you. I will also do a quick note just because I know it's been in some of the news lately. You might have heard some concerns about Energy Star because it is a federal program. The last I heard, not too long ago, there's a lot of interest federally in maintaining the Energy Star program and the Energy Guide information. So we should be able to rely on that long term, which is excellent. All right, and so then we do still, of course, have the larger investments. And unfortunately, when I'm talking about larger investments, that jump is pretty, it's a pretty big jump from a smaller appliance to things like this. And so we're talking about heating systems, for instance. That is going to be a really big one for most homes. I will note, particularly if you're on oil, switching to a heat pump system can typically save you monthly. Our electric rates are still quite competitive with oil, so it does typically have a pretty good ROI, return on investment. That said, I will note that, to be incredibly upfront with you, that a heat pump system, that electric, is going to be cost competitive with something like a gas system. So if that's something that you're more interested in for whatever reason, that would be a conversation to have. They're currently rate about the same. You can kind of consider what you think might be happening in the future in terms of costs for either. None of us, unfortunately, can really predict that. But for oil, I will say it is a fairly easy choice for most folks. And I'm happy to help do those calculations with any individuals. Also note that for water heaters, the heat pump water heater can be a good option. Similarly to, as I've mentioned before with heat pumps, that they are quite efficient. And the water heater is definitely also a very efficient version. They also have the added, can be a benefit if you intend for it and plan for it, but they can do a lot related to dehumidifying. So a lot of folks that I know have them and love them, have them in their basement, and so they get that added dehumidification from that water heater. Other big investment that can be very beneficial is investing in insulation and air sealing. Make you more comfortable while decreasing utility bills, no matter what sort of heating system you have, no matter so many other elements. That is going to be a huge one. That said, it is probably one of the higher investments that you can make in your home. So, all that said, throughout a whole bunch of options here, I still have a little bit longer, and I'm sorry we are going a little bit later. We'll have a little bit less time for Q&A than I'd hoped. Let me just try and skirt through the rest of this content. But I want to first highlight some of the things that can help. First and foremost, I always like to recommend energy audits. They are one of the best measures for understanding your home's current level of efficiency and being able to prioritize the most substantial upgrades. There are quite a small handful of independent energy auditors in the state of Maine. I'm happy to connect you with any of them if that is ever of interest for folks and you can't find them on your own. Typically, this does still cost. You're looking at maybe around $500 or so. It is, to me, typically going to be worth it, but that is obviously a personal choice. And it depends on how well you know building science. And depending on your level of trust and what you're interested in from the energy audit, those will cover quite a lot of different aspects of your home. And are more general. If you are interested specifically in insulation and you want something that is often included in an energy audit, which is called a blower door test, which really helps measure essentially that building envelope, that tightness, how much air is getting into or out of your home when a breeze comes in, is essentially what that simulates. Those can be done by a lot of insulation or weatherization contractors. So you can have a consult with one. Typically those are free, and you can make sure that you're getting an blower door test out of that. It will not be testing all of the other things. Not all of them do it, and not all of them do that every time, but it is something that if you are interested in moving forward with someone, I would recommend checking and getting an idea of. Especially, it's very good to have your before and after for that essentially efficiency upgrade level. Now, some of the more important things that can help when we're talking about finances side of things are always going to be those incentives and rebates. And I wish I had a larger list for you all. We have looked at a lot of reductions in available benefits for a lot of things. There are many more that are not on this list and that I've held off on listing, not because they're necessarily shut down, but because they are currently frozen or paused. So I hope to have an update for y'all maybe in a future webinar where I can highlight that they're back and taking new clients. In the meantime, I didn't want to waste time talking about them, but the structure for those programs do still exist. So fingers crossed for them. In the meantime, we do still have here in Maine the benefit of efficiencyMAINE, who provides a lot of incentives for insulation, heat pumps. They even have ones for clothes washers. I think it's like $50 or something like that. They can be quite beneficial. I'll just offhand tell you that the ones for both insulation and heat pumps are dependent on income. If you're qualified low income, which means that you're part of one of the 4 primary assistance programs, then you are able to get, for instance, for insulation, that is 80% of project cost up to $8,000. Moderate income, which is I think 70,000. AMI income or AGI for a single person, or 100,000 for a couple, is going to be in the 60,000 or 60% of project cost. And then for any income, it's 40% of project cost up to $4,000 for insulation work. Depending on what you're looking at getting done, that can make obviously a decent difference. Heat pumps are going to be a little bit less, and they're also only for single zone heat pumps, not for multi-zone, but for a lot of especially smaller homes, that can be really beneficial. I'll also note that they do have a heat pump hot water heater instant rebate that is available in stores. If you go over to the Lowe's or Home Depot, those can totally be DIY, excuse me, for the very brave. You can also go through a qualified installer, similar for efficiencyMAINE for any of the other work. And you can find those all online on their website, which is efficiencymaine.com. You should be able to find it very easily. And they have a nice little search function for you to find vendors. That is also something that I am happy to help any of my energy coaching clients with, if that's something that you would like assistance with. I will also take a moment to note, these are not necessarily incentives or rebates, but additional assistance programs. Obviously, HEAP is going to be the biggest one for those who are lower income. That is also commonly called the LIHEAP, the low income HEAP. And so with that, you're going to be able to get oil and or gas assistance. It's not going to cover all of it, but it will cover some. If you are qualified for HEAP, that is an annual thing you have to do every year. And if you are qualified for it, they will automatically send your information over to your electric provider. And so for CMP area, which is most of who I imagine I'm reaching here, they do have an electricity assistance that they will then, I believe, snail mail you a letter. So keep an eye out for that within the months after you have been accepted into HEAP, and you will be able to get some financial assistance for your electric bill as well. HEAP also will auto allow eligibility for a lot of other assistance programs. Again, many of them are currently paused due to funding restrictions right now, but one that is still active is the Weatherization Assistance Program, or WAP, which is done through Maine Housing and then through our local community action agencies. Again, if you have any trouble finding that group, I'm happy to connect you. WAP is going to be one that, while you are automatically eligible as a HEAP recipient, you do still have to then apply for and get put currently on the very long waiting list. So I like to put people up on that just to make sure that they have that if they're not going to be able to do, for instance, that insulation, air sealing work, that weatherization work on their own, because the cost is just going to be too high. I like to make sure that folks are on that. Hopefully, eventually, we'll be able to get that moving and get it to them. I'll also note that there are a lot of groups that have, for instance, the community aging in place that is going to be for homeowners that are, if I recall for this one, it is 62, I believe. It might be 55, but there are a lot of age restricted programs that do provide a lot of, especially basic home repair, and some basic insulation, that sort of thing, that can be quite helpful benefits, as well as some accessibility if people are having issues with needing ramps into or out of their home, any grab bars around the shower, that sort of thing. There are a lot of programs, both this one and some others, that are available that I'm happy to help connect you with. And then the other one I'll note, which is similar, is that there may be some other local programs near you. I've been trying to slowly get that network going and figure out all of the ones that exist and what their capacities are. One example that's local to us in Freeport is the Freeport Rotary Club. They have a basic home repairs group who do some really great work. And despite the fact that they call themselves basic home repairs, we'll get into some more complicated ones. And I've been able to partner with them on a project or two, and it's been a very great experience. They really care about trying to make a home really safe and comfortable for its residents. And then I will get into the question that I see Kay asked in the chat, which is about our energy coaching program. So our energy coaching program with retrofitMAINE, it covers a whole lot of things. How it works, I'll just take you through the step-by-step process really quick here. First off, we hear that you're interested. We have a forum on our website on retrofitmaine.org. I'll warn you, we have a lot of updates to make on that website, but the coaching page is up to date and you are welcome to submit your interest on that. And then I'll be following up with you to get some more information, have a further conversation about the home. We will then schedule an energy audit while funds last. So we have funds for maybe a small handful of additional energy audits. And then we're going to have to, unfortunately, try to just either recommend it or work as much as possible without an energy audit, which is not to say that we can't do that, but would love more and more folks to get that audit while we have the funding for it. And then we'll get the process started. There is no requirement to continue with energy coaching at any time. I just ask that people let me know if they want to back out so that I'm not continuing to bother them with emails. We'll hopefully have that energy audit report, and then we work together with the homeowner or resident. We're happy to work with renter situations as well as homeowners. If we are looking to do actual changes to the home, then of course we do need to have the landlord, the actual owner of the building, involved, but we're very happy to work with renters as well. And we'll help consider prioritization of what upgrades might be feasible based on each person's individual goals. And so then myself or another coach will be looking into whatever really you need from us. This is a very dependent section. A lot of the things that folks are interested in are relevant cost reducing measures that are available, can help folks apply, help coordinate a lot of this whole process, help kind of create a sort of master plan of the process that we might be looking at. For that prioritization, we might be looking at multiple years worth of work that you want to do just to try and budget that out. And I'm happy to help work with folks to create that plan, and also help reach out to different installers and contractors to get estimates from. One of the wonderful benefits we have with passivhausMAINE is we have a great network of folks who are doing all of that work. And so then once that work is completed, for every different project, if you have multiple, we'll also do a third party quality assurance review of that work, so that you can, as a homeowner, have a little bit more understanding of how that was completed, if you can trust it, if you want to maybe have a concern and bring that up with the installer. Just a little extra something that we want to provide. So that's in short what we do with energy coaching. A lot of it is just so variable and customizable depending on each home and client situation, but very happy to work with everyone as much as possible. We do prioritize low and moderate income residents, so we do have that question in the intake form, but we work with absolutely everyone. We cover Freeport, Lewiston, surrounding areas, and then we're also trying to do more of a remote option so that we can help those who are maybe not in our nearest area. So I've gone much longer than I was hoping to, but thank you all so very much for spending your lunch hour with me. Again, I'm Mika. Feel free to email me at any time. You'll also, if you see retrofitmaine.org, that has got my other email, which is just going to be info@retrofitmaine.org. If that one is easier to remember, you are welcome to use that. But I do still have some additional time for a few questions. And if anyone has anything extra that we really want to dig into, then we can, of course, I'm happy to stay a little bit late. I don't have anything coming up right after.